Ski touring, it's a thing that people do. Walk uphill, ski back down. It's really fun. And because of that, a lot more people have been doing it. And because of that, a lot more gear companies have been making a lot more gear for it. On the binding side of things, we've got these traditional tech or pin bindings on the lighter, more uphill oriented side of the spectrum. On the heavier, more downhill oriented side, we have these new hybrid bindings. Now, what both ends of the spectrum share in common is that, like any other pair of bindings, they need to be mounted to a pair of skis. So you can't have an alpine binding and a touring binding mounted on the same pair of skis. However, there is another option, one that lets you skin uphill in the same exact setup that you would use to ski in a ski resort. They're called adapters. These touring adapters are all about accessibility, and a new one recently came out. So today we're gonna talk about what they are, how they work, and who they're for. My name's Luke. We are here in Blister headquarters, and this is the Daymaker Touring TEKDAPTER. What are ski touring adapters? Essentially, they're a piece of equipment that you use to go uphill in any old alpine bindings, like the ones you use in the ski resort, and then you just get to ski back down in your alpine bindings. So rather than a single binding that's accomplishing both the uphill and the downhill, you just have your regular alpine bindings and you use your adapters to go uphill. Now, these sort of adapters have actually been around for quite some time, dating back to kind of when ski touring in its modern form first became a thing with the alpine trekkers. Those got the nickname day wreckers because they were not all that great. And then a few years ago, a new company came around called Daymakers, a very obvious play on the terrible reputation of the adapters of old. But Daymaker came out with what are now called their Daymaker Classic touring adapters. And they worked somewhat similarly to alpine trekkers in that you stuff them into an alpine binding and you can skin uphill in just about any boot. They were built pretty burly, mostly steel. They still packed up better than the original alpine trekkers, but overall, pretty burly setup. But the upside was that you could use it with any boot in just about any alpine binding on the market. So that was Daymaker's classic adapters. And what we're talking about today is their new adapter called the TEKDAPTER. The TEKDAPTERs accomplish many of the same goals, chief of which is accessibility. Both the Daymaker's Classic and the Daymaker TEKDAPTERs cost $279.99, which is far less than just about any touring binding out there. And you don't have to drill new holes in your skis. You probably don't have to get new boots. Overall, it's a much more approachable way to basically just start skinning uphill. However, the TEKDAPTERs are pretty different in several key ways that you can tell, just by looking at them. While they aim to accomplish generally similar goals, the Daymaker's Classic and Daymaker TEKDAPTERs differ pretty significantly in how they accomplish it. For starters, the TEKDAPTERs are notably lighter. The Daymaker's Classic adapters, just under 1,500 grams for a pair, and the TEKDAPTERs are coming in just under 1,100 grams for the pair. For our American audience, that is slightly more than 1 liter of water, sorry, shouldn't use liters, a cantaloupe, a bottle of wine, a textbook, a toaster, 6 apples, or 1,000 paper clips. Now, in addition to being lighter, these TEKDAPTERs are also a lot more collapsible, mostly because they run on a telescopic system. So you can pack them down to about this size and then extend them when you need to use them. Daymaker also says that once you figured out what fitment you're looking for in terms of your boots and your bindings, you can actually trim these aluminum rods just like you would with a ski pole, for example, if you want to save 1 or 2 centimeters. Either way, they are significantly more packable than the Daymaker's Classic. Another aspect that Daymaker wanted to improve upon when coming out with the TEKDAPTERs was torsional rigidity, because as with any adapter, you're being raised further off the ski than you would on a dedicated touring binding. And especially when you're side hilling on firm snow, you can get a bit of torsional flex. And so one of the main ways they accomplished it was just with the materials they used. They mostly use carbon reinforced nylon as well as aluminum. And then they also have these dual telescopic rods to help with torsional rigidity, as well as what they call their guide rail system. The guide rails are actually part of the elevators or climbing risers on this adapter. And they basically guide the heel of your boot and keep it in place while you're stepping down on the adapter to try and eliminate any side-to-side play. Now, on that note about stack height, it is still taller than most dedicated touring bindings simply because you're throwing this adapter into another binding rather than just having a binding mounted to the ski itself. But we are very curious to see how much of a factor or how little of a factor that is as we start using these this winter. And lastly, the TEKDAPTERs also feature a toolless adjustment for the AFD height. They are designed to work with boots with alpine or grip walk soles, and to account for the different AFD heights and all the different standards out there with alpine bindings, this little pad you can shift around to match up with where your boot hits the AFD on your bindings. Now, the one big caveat, especially as compared to the Daymaker Classic adapters, is that the TEKDAPTERs require that you use a boot with tech fittings in its toe. They require those tech fittings because the way that the touring system works is you are pivoting off the pins in the adapter, and therefore you need the compatible tech fittings in your boot. The good news is boots with tech fittings at the toe are more popular than ever, thanks in part to the rise of hybrid bindings like the cast system, the Shift, and the Duke PT. And there are a lot of really good skiing boots with tech fittings at the toe. But that is the one thing you'll need to keep in mind if you're trying to figure out if these will work for you. You need to have those tech fittings at the toe. So those are all the details of the Daymaker TEKDAPTERs. Now let's just do a quick run through of how they actually work. So each one has a toe and a heel piece that looks a lot like a ski boot's toe and heel piece, and they go into the bindings just like you would with your ski boot. You will start by putting the toe in the toe piece, and then as we noted before, these are collapsible. So what you're gonna do here, assuming you've had them collapsed in your backpack, is extend them to meet the heel piece. Next, you will lock the telescopic portions so that they don't collapse once you close the heel of your alpine binding. And the first time you do this, you would fine tune the tension to arrive at whatever works for the settings you have. We've already done this, so next step is just to snap the heel of the binding up and lock the adapter into it. So once the adapter is locked into your alpine bindings, the next thing you're gonna do is get your boot into the adapter. So what you do is you take your boot and you insert one of the tech fittings on one side and then just snap it into the one on the other side. Once both pins are in, you'll flip this switch and that further closes the jaws on the tech fittings of your boot. Like the switch that you flip to collapse or expand the TEKDAPTERs, this one is also adjustable, and you'll want to tighten it down so there's no play the first time you use it, and then you should just be able to flip it every time you transition. So once that's locked in, you are ready to go uphill. You have full range of motion, just like any other tech toe binding. There's very little friction, you're good to go. Now, if you encounter a steeper hill, the TEKDAPTERs have multiple riser settings. You've got your middle setting, and you've got your high setting. And that's pretty much it. Once you get to the top, you just step out of the bindings like you would if your boot was in the binding, collapse the TEKDAPTERs, throw them in your pack or your jacket or whatever, and ski back down. So that is it for our first look of the Daymaker TEKDAPTERs. If you want to learn a whole lot more about how they were made, why they were made, who they were made for, you can check out episode 269 of our Gear 30 podcast. That's with the founder and engineer of Daymaker, Garai Dadali. In the meantime, we're going to be getting these on snow very soon, and we will have a full review out once we've spent enough time on them. So as always, keep an eye out for updates on our website, blisterreview.com.